awesome watch. Overall, I would give the tournament an 8 or 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. The only way I think it would have been any better is if we would have had Jordan Spieth involved in that playoff at the end. He didn't have to win it, but to have the name and respect and recognition that he's got now involved in that, I think would have just added even a little more to the accomplishment of whoever won it, which ended up being Zach Johnson. And again, congratulations to Zach Johnson. Great guy from our neighbor to the south in Iowa, and just very happy for him. Now, let's get to my playoff tweak for the PGA Tour, and then we'll wrap up the meat and move on to more segments of the show, maybe some balls juice, definitely a bunch of quickies, and balls deep thought of the day, how we end every show. But lastly, for the meat here on the golf topic, my suggestion to PGA major tournament officials. As I mentioned earlier, these major tournaments, they each get to have their own rules of this is what our tiebreaker is going to be, this is what this is going to be, this is what that's going to be. For this discussion, we're referring strictly to the tiebreaker format. Now, in the Masters tiebreaker format, the Masters tournament, if there are 2 people tied, or 3 people, or 4 people, or 5 people tied, whatever, they go to a sudden death format, where they all go to hole 18, likely, or maybe 17, or wherever. I'm guessing 18 usually, because they tend to do them backwards. But sometimes they start on 16 just in case they got to do 3 of them. But anyway, they have a sudden death one where everybody, no matter how many people it is, you play a hole. If the one person has a lower score than everybody else, that person wins. We play holes until that happens, until one person has a lower score than everyone else. At the U.S. Open, like I mentioned, if there is a tie, as we saw years ago with Tiger Woods, and I forget who that was against. It wasn't Molinari. It was something like that. So some Italian name, I think. But anyway, we saw that years ago with Tiger. And at the U.S. Open, yeah, they play 18. They go, okay, who's ever tied for the lead, come back tomorrow. You're playing the whole course all over again. Not really a fan of that at all. Especially if it's a 2-person tie. Like, I gotta watch these 2 people golf for a whole 3 hours or whatever, and by hole 9 or 10 or 11, one guy's got a 4-stroke lead on the other guy. It's over. There's no drama. We're just, waiting out the inevitable, and we're bored. Or, like I said, the third final way is the way that we had at the British Open, where we have an aggregate. It's called an aggregate playoff, and there is 4 holes selected, and you play all 4 of those holes. And then, like I said, the lowest cumulative score off those 4 total is the winner. What I would like to propose to the golf world, to professional golf, is that major tournaments determine their tiebreaker formats not based off of their own independent whims and desires, but based off of the number of competitors that are in the tiebreaker. For example, when we have a 2-person tiebreaker, 2 guys finish the tournament with the lead, mano a mano, what we do there every time, regardless of where you are, should be sudden death. First guy to beat the other guy on a hole. It's 1-on-1, okay? So when you got 2 guys, that's the format to go to. Now, if we've got 3 guys, this is the next 2 numbers here, 3 and 4, are where you have options, okay? If you have 3 competitors in a playoff for a major championship, you have the option to have either a sudden death format or an aggregate, since it is not just a head-to-head competition. Now, the reason that you still give the okay for the sudden death is because you allow groups of 3 to play the course throughout the week in the first 2 rounds. So a group of 3 in a tiebreaker playoff on a Sunday or a Monday in this case, is still sensible then, it's still reasonable. Or if you have 3, you can choose an aggregate playoff, since we, the head-to-head, we're the type of tournament where we think head-to-head is the only reason to ever have a sudden death. We've got more than 2, multiple competitors, 3 or more, so we're going aggregate. That's an option, okay? So 2 has to be sudden death. 3, option of sudden death or aggregate. 4, sudden death is no longer an option. If you have 4 people or more in your tiebreaker playoff for a championship, sudden death should not be allowed. It is too clustered, too cluttered, too crowded, too many one tie, all tie crap. No, you don't get the right, fair result in that situation. That doesn't mean a sudden death tiebreaker format's bad. It means it's not right for that many people. So if you got 4 people in a tiebreaker, then we're going aggregate, or you have the option of doing the U.S. Open additional round, because you could then have 2 groups to follow playing the course, where just because one guy is getting his butt kicked by the other guy in his group doesn't mean that the tournament's already over and we're just waiting. No, there's a whole nother group going on. So that's why at 4 you get the option of an aggregate playoff or the whole nother round. And then anytime there are 5 or more competitors in a playoff tiebreaker in a major golf tournament, that should be when we play another 18 tomorrow. All of it's sensible. It all works with its conditions, okay? And we're not just saying, well, no, this is just the way we do it, but that's how it runs. The U.S. Open says, no, that's just how we do a tiebreaker. We play a whole nother 18 holes. If we got 2 people, it's going to be a boring round of golf, likely at some point in time. If we got 3 or 4 or 5 people, it's going to be one of the freaking best rounds of golf you'll ever see. Well, why don't you change it based off of what it is? Anyway, I can rant on that again some other time, but that is the genius that comes from the mind of Scotty Ball, just a small sample of it right there, and I pray, oh yes, I pray, oh yeah, I pray, we got to pray just to make it today. I pray that someone from the PGA or golf world hears my idea and goes, duh, that's that makes sense. Why? Wow, how did it take 140 some years for some guy sitting at a computer in his house to frickin' figure that out and tell us that? That's the best I can hope for. I won't hold my breath or anything, but I'll knock on a little wood. There we go. All right. Well, anyway, that wraps up the meat of the show tonight. Thanks again for tuning in. You're listening to Balls Deep Sports Talk with Scotty Ball on WNLMradio.com and on Spreaker. You might even be listening on YouTube. We are on YouTube now. Can you believe that? That's pretty awesome too. So, anyway, we have the meat wrapped up, which usually means it's time for Balls Juice. And by usually, I mean for the last month or so, as it was approximately a month ago that I debuted a new segment on the show here entitled Balls Juice, where I devote time to discussing the juicy, spicy, off-field stories going on in the sports world. But as it were this week, I don't really have very many worthy, juicy off-field stories. Mark Cuban made some comments making an analogy of DeAndre Jordan leaving the Clippers to go to the Mavericks and then changing his mind and taking his word back and going back to the Clippers. He used a public analogy referring to that as makeup sex, and then went on to say that it's always better, it's always really good, but then eventually you wake up and you look next to the person and you realize what the problems really were, and blah blah blah. And I found it humorous. I'm sure plenty of people would find it in bad taste or unnecessary, but I didn't take it that seriously. The fact of the matter is Mark Cuban got screwed over by DeAndre Jordan, and thus his entire team did, and he's just doing what he can to save face as he looks weak and dumb in quite a bit of the story as it has played out up until this point. So I didn't have any problem with it. I didn't take it too seriously, and I thought it was, like I said, both funny and fairly accurate as well. I guess there's another juicy story also in the NBA side of things. So you'll get a couple drops of balls juice, not the quart size that we usually offer here. But I believe it was at the BET Awards. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. I only caught a little bit of the story today on the ESPN, but I believe it was on the BET Awards. They had a most valuable player of the NBA season award that they gave out at that, and it was voted on by the players, and I think it might have been voted on by media or writers as well too. I'm not sure, but I know it was voted on by players. And James Harden won that MVP award. And so it brings a little new life and attention and debate to this past season's NBA MVP debate, which we had here on the show. And the way I define the word valuable, there was no question that James Harden was the most valuable player to his team this year. However, you've got so many people that argue that you have to win. You have to win the most to be the most valuable, because winning is more valuable than anything. Well, winning is also accomplished by teams, not by individuals. So it's a very sticky slope. And like I said, the way I personally define the word valuable, I felt that James Harden's contributions to his squad provided more value than Steph Curry to his. It's not a knock on Steph Curry. The guy had a phenomenal season and was every bit as deserving of the award as well, and is a phenomenal player. But he's got a great team where he doesn't have to do as much. James Harden had to do everything for his team the whole season. And they barely accomplished less in the regular season than Steph Curry's team did, even though Steph Curry's team accomplished more in the postseason. But you can't give out regular season awards based off of what people do in the postseason. If you're going to do that, then you need to make them a season award that you give out when the entire season, which includes the postseason, is over with. Okay? Then you could do that. But these are regular season awards, so you can't say, well, this guy's team went on to win the championship, so that proved he was the most valuable player. Like, what? That's not even a remotely sensible leap and connection whatsoever. Okay? Yeah, but he's the best guy on that team, and that team was the best team. So that means he's the most valuable. No, it means he's the best player on the best team. Do we need to change the letters? Or instead of saying, this year the NBA MVP award goes to, next year we'll say, this year the NBA BP OTBT award, best player on the best team award. I mean, that's where we're getting to with this. No, come on. Look up the word valuable in a dictionary sometime. It's not that hard. They do still make dictionaries. You could probably have one on your phone. Okay? But anyway, so that was a little bit juicy too. So that got worked up again, and I think it's a great debate because there's no wrong answer on this one. Steph Curry